So welcome everybody to what is already our second session on the Ex Libris 2022 Knowledge Days. We kicked off the Knowledge Days yesterday with the new and improved ALMA overlap analysis tool. And today, June 7th, we have two sessions. Our first session beginning momentarily with Mr. Moshe Shechter, resource sharing, item availability, calculation, and item level requests. There's been a lot of interest in this topic, so we have with us today Moshe. And then later today, we have fiscal period closure. Fiscal period closure is going to be given 3 times, June 7, June 8, and June 9. So we hope we'll see you in all of the other sessions. I'm going to send out the link to this page so that everyone will have it. You can register from this page, and you can also find the recordings as well as supplementary material. So without further ado, I'm going to turn this over to Moshe. Moshe is our Senior Product Manager located with myself in the Jerusalem headquarters. And Moshe, I'm going to stop sharing now, and I'm going to turn this over to you. You should be able to take it away now. I'm making you the presenter. Go ahead.
Thank you, Yoel. So I'll start the sharing and we'll get right on.
Wonderful. We see you and we hear you, Moshe.
All right, thank you. Okay, so thank you for joining us and welcome to our session. As we all presented, we will be talking about two features of resource sharing: item availability calculation and the item level requesting. But as we go into these two topics, we'll kind of talk about a more holistic view of these features, and we'll talk about some neighboring features that are part of resource sharing and complement the experience and the services that these options enable you to provide to your services. As you all mentioned, there has been quite some interest about this over the last couple of weeks, and we thought it would make sense to have a session and share this information so that we're all on the same page. So as I said, we'll start with some basic concepts and some other features that are around or next to these features, as I like to think of it, so that together we get a more holistic picture of what it is that we are discussing. And the one thing that I wanted to first of all mention and talk about for a few minutes is that, ALMA resource sharing is a peer-to-peer based system. So it is designed to enable any two peer resource sharing systems to communicate, request, and ship resources for resource sharing. While there are some optimizations in the system that enable the system to work more efficiently within a consortial system, so where there is a consortia and there's some more sharing of a shared catalog, for example, using the network zone, then there are some optimizations in place. But still, the basic infrastructure of the system is that it is a peer-to-peer system and enables any two partners to communicate and exchange resource sharing resources. So the basic infrastructure assumes that any borrower may be part of a number of networks, potentially. For example, there may be a closer network which may be based on some broker system, which is some local broker system, some statewide system, or whatever type of broker system that this partner is part of. Or there may be another network that is a peer-to-peer network, other neighboring institutions, libraries that I may collaborate with that are nearby and make sense to communicate and exchange resources with. And then I may be a member of another wider network. So there may be my state network and then another wider countrywide network, or some local network and another statewide network, some neighboring institutions, and perhaps that are part of some agreement, and then perhaps some other institutions that are not part of some formal agreement, but I can still communicate with. In short, as a resource sharing partner, borrower or lender, I may be part of a number of networks and may communicate with them in many different ways, and may have preferences as to which I communicate with and how. So for example, a ROTA, a resource sharing ROTA, may be built of a number of layers, each one representing a different network and perhaps communicated with in a different manner. For example, it may be part of a fulfillment network, which obviously reflects those institutions that are nearby that I have special agreements with, that I can exchange patron information with, and I can have pick up anywhere or walk-in services with, and they would be my first fulfillment network partners. But then I can have another set of partners which are not fulfillment network. They're not part of my inner circle of potential partners, but I can communicate with them as peer-to-peer resource sharing partners. So Maroda may first try to send to fulfillment network partners and then to some peer-to-peer partners. And then go on to another broker, for example, which may be some statewide broker that if none of my fulfillment network, none of my peer-to-peer partners can fulfill my request, I can move on to the broker, and then beyond that to another peer-to-peer system or another broker. There could be layers in how my Rhoda is built up. Here's an example, a capture that I took from one of the institutions that is set up this way. And we can see a number of Rhoda templates. This is actually their templates. And we can see that there is a network zone Rhoda template, which reflects a consortial Rhoda of consortial partners within that consortia. But then there are some other institutions that are part of a different Rhoda template. And then there's another Rhoda template, which reflects a last resort, which is Iliad in this case. And then they could have a bunch of Rhoda assignment rules that send first to the network zone Rhoda, then to partner second to last resort, which could be other peer-to-peer partners. And if none of them fulfill the request, then another rule will send out a request to partner of last resort, which may be Iliad. So this is a nice example of how we can have a tiered Rhoda with a number of Rhoda templates and a number of rules so that request propagates from my inner circle to another outer circle and perhaps then to the last resort. And all that can be done within the infrastructure of the Rhoda and Rhoda assignment rules. This here is another example. Now we're looking at a list of rules, and we can see that there is a consortial rule that says first try my network zone network. If that does not work, then go on and send to another partner, and then to another partner. And if none of that works, then go on and send out to an Iliad fallback. So we can have a Rhoda that actually propagates, first tries to send to my inner circle, then tries to send to other lenders, and eventually we'll also send out to a last resort. In terms of last resorts, there are a number of systems that Alma can send requests to as last resort. By now, we've initially, Alma has supported Iliad, so that you can have a request, a borrower request created in Alma, which is sent into Iliad for further processing as a borrower request within Iliad. So Iliad is actually on your Rhoda. The request is created in Alma, propagates through the Rhoda, and if not fulfilled by the Rhoda, sent out to Iliad, and then fulfilled based on the Iliad lending strings. Alma by now supports also Tipasa and WorldShare, same type of workflow. The configuration is a little different, but it is the same type of workflow. So these systems can be put on your Rhoda as last resort. And if none of your local partners fulfill the request is just pushed right on into these partners. And we're currently starting also a testing phase with Relay for implementing the same type of service, so that the system will also be implementable as a last resort, and Alma will be able to push your requests into that system. So that's one thing to keep in mind. Resource sharing system is not only about requesting from your consortia if you're part of a consortia. There are optimizations for that, but the system can do much more than that. It could also send requests beyond your consortia, beyond your immediate network of nearby partners. In addition to that, and to make the picture a little more complete, is that the resource sharing request can also be part of another service, or can link into another service, which is not a resource sharing service. So for example, I may have a resource sharing request that I cannot fulfill with any of my tiers of potential lenders, but I could transform this request into a purchase request. So that even though I cannot obtain this resource from any of my peer partners, I can perhaps decide that I want to buy this resource for my patrons to be able to make use of it. It could be via purchase request, or it could be that I can have access to per-review sites, such as CCC Get It Now or other options that enable me to pay and get access, limited access to a resource so that I can get this resource for my partners. So again, this is to emphasize that a resource sharing request can be more than just a resource sharing request. It could go into different networks of potential lenders, but it could also link into other services that still enable you to obtain that resource for the benefit of the patron, even though it is not accessible as a resource sharing service. Then, of course, there's also the analytics, which is, of course, important to all of us. And that is that the request, even if not fulfilled, even then it has value. Of course, we want to fulfill requests. We want happy patrons that get the resources that they need. But even if that fails, there is still the benefit of having that analytics. It could feed into your collection building considerations when you come to think about what type of resources you may want to purchase later on. That information about what has been requested and perhaps not fulfilled may also feed into your considerations when it comes time to think about that. So analytics is another important factor that is a benefit of managing the resource sharing request. So I wanted to kind of bring that together, all of that, so that we keep in mind, like back of our head, that while we are talking about optimizations, and that will be the main topic we will be discussing for the next couple of minutes, the main, of course, objective of resource sharing requests is to get the resource through your resource sharing network. And we will be talking about optimizations that enable accurately requesting and receiving that material. But as we will keep referring to, the request does not have to be fulfilled as a resource sharing request, or does not have to be fulfilled within your immediate network. It could go beyond that. But let's now go on and talk about our main topic, and that is the item availability calculation. Item availability calculation is actually a feature within Alma that enables the library to share more information with the patron. So the patron is more knowledgeable about the request he or she is about to place, the chances of this request being fulfilled. Will my request be fulfilled? What should I expect as a patron placing this request? And the system, as we will see, can expose more information to the patron. So instead of just having this experience of placing a request and then I don't know what's going to happen with this. Will I get this? When will I get this? The system can share more information with the patron, so the patron will know, yes, I know I have this resource. Very likely I'll be able to get this resource for you, or I'm not sure I have this resource for you. You can still submit this request if you want. We will make our best effort, but it's not like we know we have this resource available. And this information can be shown to the patron, and that is probably an improvement to the patron experience. We all like to know in advance about a service we're about to request. And so here's a little clip here that demonstrates this, and we will walk through this clip. What we'll see here is we'll start a process in Primo. You can see that we're starting here from a Primo screen. I'm logged into my Primo screen. We'll start a search process in Primo, find some resource we don't locally own, but the network does own, and we'll place a resource sharing request, and we'll get that information from the system about the availability of the resource that we are about to request. So I'll start by doing some search in Primo for a title that I like to search when I demonstrate resource sharing. And I just do my search in Primo. I'm searching the network, and I find a resource that is not available in my library, but is available elsewhere. And then I click on the resource sharing link. You can see, oh, that jumped away.
Moshe, just allow me to interrupt for one moment. If anyone has any questions or comments, feel free to send them in the chat. I don't see anything so far, but if you do have any, feel free to send them in. Sorry for the interruption, Moshe. Go ahead.
Okay. Okay, so I go on and do my resource sharing form, and I get the form open. We can see the form, the pre-populated form, and we can see this information up here that says item available for request. And this is because a calculation ran there behind the scenes that calculated the availability of this resource in the network and found out that I do have this resource somewhere in my network. So the patron knows this item is available, and the request is likely to be obtained. Now here's the lender. What we're seeing right now is the lender side. That's the same resource that's behind the iron curtain, and that's on the lender side. That's the Open University. And we can see that the lender in my RODA has this resource behind the iron curtain. That's the resource I was searching. And there's one copy here that is in place, a bunch of copies that are not available, but one that is available. And this is how the system was able to identify that the item is available. We'll now change this item to be missing, not available, so that now all the copies are not available. If I redo now my request form, I'm back in Primo, so let's refresh our screen and reload that form. And now that same algorithm that on the first round determined that there is an available resource, this time when I do resource sharing, we'll do that calculation and say no item available for request. Okay, so that is based on a real-time calculation that checked the lender side, and on the first attempt we made, found there is an available item. Then when we changed that item to be not available and retried the form, now the form says no item available for request. That's very basically what item level calculation is. Now, what's happening actually behind the scenes, how that calculation happens? Actually, Alma is running through your RODA. It's running the RODA rules and is doing all that calculation that normally happens after the request has been submitted. The calculation of the RODA and the availability of the RODA. It's actually doing that before the request is submitted, which is why there may be some delay to that, because there's a process, a calculation that goes on, and that calculation goes through each one of your partners on the RODA to calculate their availability. So those of you with a sharp sight may have noticed that before that item available indication showed up on the form, there was a little calculation going on there saying checking item availability. In my case, it was very quick because I had a small RODA. And so the calculation got the calculation results pretty quickly. But depending on the size of your RODA, that may take some time for that calculation to take place. Actually, Alma runs through your RODA assignment rules, calculate what the RODA would be. And let's say my RODA has 4 partners. It then starts to calculate all these partners in order to find, do they have a resource? And that's, as this little movie here is intended to illustrate, may take some time. Calculation goes, and then when I get one that I know is available, then I know the item is available and I can report back on the form. Item is available, request is available. If, of course, none of the potential lenders would respond with something that is available, then the no item available indication will show up. Now, this calculation, this locate calculation, happens based on your configuration. So the partners that have a locate profile, that locate profile is used. And if that locate profile is configured to include availability, requestability checks, then that calculation will take place. So it goes as accurate as you have configured your locate profiles. Now, let's say I have this no item available for request indication that showed up. No partners can fulfill my request.
Moshe, may I interrupt for one moment? We've got a question here. Perhaps it's a good time to go through some questions that are.
Sure, yeah.
So somebody asked, after the sharing gets available, will it be available forever or for a period of time?
So available, that indication on the form is actually available right now. That's what it says. It's available right now. It means that if I place the request right now, some partner has an available resource that will be requested. Of course, if for whatever reason that lender rejects that request, and by the time that that lender rejects the request, the other available partners have become non-available, the request may still fail. But that will probably be less likely to happen because we know somebody right now has the resource and the request will be submitted. It's very likely it will be fulfilled. But it's a picture of, it's a snapshot of the current situation right now. Right now, there's an available partner.
Okay. And somebody else asks, may I know how do I enable item availability option?
Right. Yeah, we'll take a look at the configuration. That's we'll go
Okay,
to the
so that's coming up. All right, thanks a
yeah,
lot.
that's
That's
coming
all
up,
we got
of
for
course.
now.
Okay. So I want to talk a little bit about the relationship between that item available indication up here and the ability to place the request. You can see here, that's the out-of-the-box behavior of the system. When the indication is no item available, I can still submit this request. And that may be something that you may want to consider because you may have partners that you cannot calculate their availability. For example, go back to our introduction, you may have a last resort that can fulfill your request. So even though you cannot calculate any known availability within your network, maybe that you still want your patrons to place the request because you may go on and find a last resort that can fulfill the request. So you may want to enable, and that's the out-of-the-box behavior of the system. Item not available, still can place the request. We'll see how you can change that behavior. But that will be a situation where you may want this situation. Or if you want to let the library still fulfill this request via a purchase request. Remember, I mentioned in my introduction, your resource sharing request can be the base from which you launch a purchase request. Even though I have no partners can fulfill the request, patron can still submit, and I'll try to fulfill this as a purchase request. And here's a very short clip about how that will happen. So what we have here is a resource sharing request. You can see a borrow request that has been submitted. As library staff, I have the option to place a purchase request that does require allowing this by privileges. So you may not have this out of the box. It's something that you need to enable as a privilege to library staff that it's authorized to do that. But if you have set up that authorization, your library staff has the privilege, you will have this option to place a purchase request from your resource sharing request. That will open up a purchase request form. Will give you the option to either cancel the existing borrow request or keep the borrowing request and in parallel run a purchase request. I've chosen to cancel the resource sharing request. And that will send a cancellation to the patron with the message that we're canceling your resource sharing request because we're going to try to purchase it for you. Of course, you don't have to notify the patron. That's a choice you make. But you may notify the patron just so that they're aware of what's going on and send a message, and the message will say, we can't find a resource sharing partner for you. We'll try to purchase this for you. And the result of that will be that the resource sharing request will indeed be canceled, will be out of my task list. Instead of that, I will get the purchase request form, which will come up in a second, and we'll be able to manage this as a purchase request. You can see the purchase request is pre-populated with all the metadata. The requester information has also been brought over to this form. I can choose to place a hold request on this resource once it's purchased, etc. So from here on, it's your standard purchase request process. So this will be a scenario where your resource sharing, you can't fulfill as a resource sharing. You still allow the patron to place a request, and you try to fulfill this as a purchase request. It's of course an option if purchase request is something you don't do or don't want to do in the resource sharing library. Of course, you don't have to choose to do that. Some other options, even if the resource sharing request cannot be fulfilled, to still enable submitting the request. We talked about purchase request, but it could be that you can get this resource from another third-party provider. We mentioned, for example, as a per review option, or something that you want library intervention in obtaining. Here's another little example. I have a request. It is a little small, but enough for you to understand what's going on. I have a request, and I can set it up to an external partner. When doing send on this request, the system will actually take me on to a search in my electronic collections. And these electronic collections may include collections that are perhaps not exposed to my patrons because they are they require payment. I don't want to expose these to my patrons through Primo, but there are still collections that I can access. And so that I can set up my request with an external partner. That's the partner type. And doing a send to that partner actually triggers a search within my electronic collections. And then I can find something that I can perhaps link to. And this example is just something that I link directly to. But perhaps a real example would be where something that you need to pay in order to get a copy of. And then you can get this resource, go back to your resource sharing request, and just send the patron a link or a PDF or whatever that you have prepared from this resource. So I got my resource and downloaded that PDF. I go back to my resource sharing request, which is what I'm doing right now. And from there, I will have an option to notify my patrons. I have another action here that says externally obtained. And that will enable me to put in a URL here and just send my patron. So the patron placed a resource sharing request. I could not fulfill this request with my network. I still had a partner, which is an external partner, that actually led me to a collection that my patrons do not have access to, but I can pay and get access to. And then I send them the URL using that screen. And the patron will just get a message with a link to that resource. That's the message that the patron will eventually get. Please find the URL below. That's the URL that we will obtain for you. So this is another example. By the way, you could have another service here where I get the PDF and then I can just go on and just upload a file. So I have an action to upload a file. I can just go on and upload a file. So this here shows a scenario where I could not get the resource for my resource sharing, but then I used an external partner to still get that resource, upload a PDF, send a URL, and have my patron get a link to the resource they request. The labels that we saw, item available for request or no item available for request, are labels, right? So you can configure them. You can configure them to change their wording. You may change that from no item available to request to be something like.
Moshe, can I interrupt just for a moment? Because somebody's asking here a part that may be relevant before you go on. Is matching with the records in the community zone or going through each partner catalog as per the rota? Would you like me to repeat that?
Yeah, can you please?
Is it matching with the records in the community zone or going through each partner catalog as per the rota?
Okay, so if this is referring to the service I was talking about obtained externally, it just goes into your search. Doing a local search, so you're searching your collections, those that you have activated that are part of your collection. It's talking. If the question is about the previous slides about the availability itself, the availability is to your rota. It's calculating your local partners, those that have you configured as part of your rota. And answer the question, please feel free to resubmit it and perhaps help me understand better what you're asking.
Thank you, Moshe.
And I will try to, this is about the configuration. So here's the answer to that question about the configuration. When customizing the request form this is a Primo V environment. In the Primo V, you configure that through the discovery menu. In classic Primo, this is part of the fulfillment configuration. This is a Primo V form. So when you do the resource sharing form customization, again, available from the discovery link or Primo V, the form, this is the form where you configure which fields will show on the request form. And here you can say item availability, make that visible. And this is the indication that will make that indication show up. That's all. That's all you need. Item availability, visible, and that's it. It's there. It's going to use, of course, your RODA. So it depends on you having a RODA assignment tool configured and local profiles and all that. But once you have all that, in order to have that indication show up on your request form, all you need to do is to go into the resource sharing form customization in the discovery menu, Primo V, and turn on visible. Talk about the mandatory one in the next slides. And that is that we can also set that if no item available for request, then gray out the option to submit. Okay, I've been talking about why it could make sense for you to enable patrons to place requests even when you don't know about available resources. Talk about the option to place a purchase request or obtain externally. But you may say, hey, I don't do any of that. I'm not going to do any purchasing request. I'm not going to go and pay per view. I'm not doing that. All I'm doing is a consortial service. I'm trying to get this for my network. And if not, if I know I can't, then I don't want my patrons to get frustrated by submitting a request that I know I cannot fulfill from within my RODA. So you can, and this will be part of your August release option, to set up the form so that if no item available for request, then the submit button here will be grayed out, will not be able to place the request. The configuration will actually be that switch here, mandatory, to achieve that. So if item is available, patron will be able to place the request. No item available, patrons will not place the request. They'll just know, sorry, we didn't have this for you. So don't bother placing the request. And that may, of course, reduce frustration by not having patrons place the request and getting a message from the library saying, sorry, we could not get that for you. Patrons will know that something they request, a very high probability they will actually get.
Moshe, please allow me to interrupt one more time. We have a clarification on the previous question.
Okay.
I'm going to repeat the previous question, and then I'm going to say the clarification. So the original question was, is it matching with the records in the community zone or going through each partner catalog as per the ROTA? And then the clarification is, it is in regard to when a resource sharing request is placed after confirming that we don't have the resource within our institution zone.
So the ROTA calculation goes through each catalog of the partners that are on your on the ROTA. So it does an actual search. It could be another Alma partner. It could be another non-Alma partner. It just goes through the catalog of each one of them and makes the search within their own catalog. And I hope I got it right this time.
Okay, we got a thanks, so hopefully it's got it. Okay. And thank you for the clarification, person who sent it in. Go ahead, Moshe. Excuse the interruption. By the way, I'll give you a 9-minute warning, by the way. You got 9 minutes left.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay. And that's, I think, perfect timing for us to talk about the last bit here, which is kind of built on top of what we've talked about until now. So we've seen how the form can predict for you whether we can get the item for you or not. And we talked about how that actually does that full calculation, goes through your ROTA, checking the catalogs of the potential lenders and checking whether they have an item available that can fulfill the request. Another feature that can be built on top of that is designed to better support scenarios of requesting item level, and that refers to multi-volumes, mostly to multi-volumes. That would be the classic situation where that is used. And the idea is that on the request form, I may need information not only about the fact that there's an item available, but also what volumes, if it's a multi-volume, what volumes are out there that are requestable that I can request And that information can also be added to the form. We'll talk about the constraints of that, the prerequisites for that. But here's a little clip that shows this as well. So we'll quickly run through that. We already have the form opened up. We see that calculation item available showed up here, but we will see that another bit of information is going to be displayed on this form, and that is a description here, which is a drop-down saying V1 and V4. And these are volumes that are available across my network. So there's a volume 1 and a volume 4 for this specific resource. I found a title, it's somewhere in my network, and the available volumes are 1 and 4. And so I know that if I'm interested in volume 2, then I, should not be placing this request because that is not available in my network. Only volume 1 and 4 are available in the network. How did that happen? The calculation we were talking about before went on to the lender. Here's my Open University lender. And this lender has a bunch of volumes. Okay, 1, 2, 3, and 4 actually. But we can see that many of them are not in place. And the only ones that are in place are volume 1 and 4. Which is why on the form I had V1 and the V4, which are taken from the item description. You can see V1 and V4. V2 and V3 were not shown on the form because they are not in place. Now here's an example from a single lender, the Open University, but the same calculation would go through multiple lenders. And it would be the same calculation we talked about before. Actually, when the calculation is done, the RODA assignment rules are run, the RODA is calculated, each one of the partners is calculated as per the locate profile. When a partner has no potential lenders, then of course that partner is not an option. But if a partner does have potential copies that can fulfill this request, then when this is set up, the system will not only say, okay, I know that I have the resource available, it will also go on and get the physical item descriptions from that item, and by that know which volumes are. Now what it is doing is that it's taking these physical item descriptions, it's accumulating them, and then deduplicating them. So I may have two partners on my RODA that have V1. We'll have only one row here saying V1. And actually, there are two lenders that can fulfill this request. So if the patient selects V1, the RODA will include those two partners and send the request to one of them. If I select V4, it will be only to the lenders that have V4. This deduplication is very, very based on your network having some convention of how to catalog multiple volumes, because the system will not know that V1 and Vol1 are the same one, or that V1 and VA are actually the same volume. If there's a convention that we catalog volumes as V1, V2, then the system will be able to deduplicate that information and show it as one line here. If you don't have that convention, then what will appear here is you have Vol1, VA, and all will appear as options, which may confuse the patrons. So implementing this feature very much depends on a consortium that has well-established conventions with regard to how you configure multiple volumes within the network.
That's the same issue, by the way, Moshe, we have when we're doing any kind of deduplication of holdings. If we're trying to compare coverage of physical and electronic, everyone enters their coverage information and their enumeration information differently.
Right. It's a very big challenge with identifying correctly what is in the coverage of a physical.
Yeah, it's the same with the issues. Some will put BD dot, and some will say ISS, and some will say num, and some will say NO dot.
Yeah, right.
Sorry
so just
for the interruption.
Yeah, we're almost done. That's okay. So just to complete the workflow, if the patron did request volume 1, then the borrow request will be submitted with that information. The information will make it onto the lender side. and the lender side will have an actual requested barcode indication on the lender side, because Alma knows that the patron requested volume 1, and Alma knows that on the lender side, V1 is this specific item. So the lender gets a request which is very accurate and identifies the exact barcode that is being requested, so that the lender will not by mistake ship volume 2, even though the requested volume is volume 1. This information propagates through the resource sharing process, and the lender knows exactly, this is the barcode that I need to fulfill. This is all the lending requests on the lender side. You're seeing Open University, that's our lender information. This information shows up on the PIC slip, and so that's clearly visible to the patron, to the staff operator that works on this request. This barcode is volume 1, and that's what's being requested, so that I don't get the wrong volume off the shelf and ship the wrong volume. Okay, I think we're exactly on time, I think.
Yeah, we are, Moshe. Any final questions? First of all, Moshe, that was absolutely fascinating. Thanks for sharing that with us. Any questions or comments from anybody before we close here? Let me just point out to everybody that what I sent you earlier, the link to the Knowledge Day session, also has reference to 2 MP4s that Moshe has created for this, 2 videos, as well as a PowerPoint, so you can view that information there. We'll be posting the recording later, either today or tomorrow, and we'll let you know that that recording is up. It'll be both on our YouTube channel as well as linked from within the Knowledge Days page. So thanks, everybody, and thanks again, Moshe, and have a nice day. Bye-bye.